All right, we have some big news coming in from Maharashtra. Two factions of the NCP at this point at loggerheads over party symbol. Sharad Pawar faction of the NCP now moving the top court against the party symbol. Sharad Pawar's faction filing a plea with the Supreme Court to restrain Ajit Pawar faction from using the clock symbol for the upcoming assembly polls in Maharashtra. Counsel for Sharad Pawar mentions the case before the Supreme Court, seeking listing of this case at the earliest. The NCP symbol, which is the clock, we know that Sharad Pawar has been asking for Ajit faction not to touch the symbol or use it ahead of the Maharashtra assembly elections. And there have been instances where it has been used in the past. Sharad Pawar now moving the Supreme Court against it. Shrishti, our correspondent, tracking courts for us. Shrishti, give us more on what the petition says. Sharad Pawar asking for Ajit Pawar faction not to use the clock symbol of NCP.
Well, yes, Nabila, as we know, the matter with regard to NCP versus NCP has been pending before the Supreme Court. So an application was filed last month by the Sharad Pawar faction before Supreme Court, saying that the Ajit Pawar faction should be restricted from using the clock symbol in the upcoming Lok Sabha elections in Maharashtra. They had also claimed urgency. Around 25th September, we saw the matter being mentioned before the top court and urgent hearing being sought. Now, at that point, the court had, the other side had asked for some time, and the court had granted time to the Ajit Pawar faction to reply to the application that has been filed before the court. The hearing was scheduled to happen on 1st October, but it didn't. So we saw Sharad Pawar's lawyer again mention the matter before the court today, saying that the matter has not been heard. The plea, considering the nominations are to be filed soon, there's a certain sense of urgency in this case, which is why the matter should be heard soon. A date for tomorrow was sought for a hearing. However, the court has decided to hear this matter, from what we know as of now, day after tomorrow. And that's when the court will be hearing this application. Now, another thing that the Supreme Court has pointed out very clearly is that earlier some orders were passed by the court with regard to how the symbols have to be used during elections, where it had also said that certain undertakings have to be given. The court has clearly asked the Sharad Pawar faction that if they think that there is any violation of any order of the top court by the Ajit Pawar faction, then the same should be identified and the court should be informed about it during the hearing. Court has clearly said that once it passes an order, both the parties are supposed to comply with it, while also remarking that if orders in this case have not been complied with by the Ajit Pawar faction, the court will take a serious view. So as of now, the Sharad Pawar faction has been asked to identify the areas where they're claiming that there are violations of court's earlier orders with regard to the use of symbols, and the court will know more what the court has to say, and if the court will be satisfied with the argument that is being made on part of the Sharad Pawar faction that the clock symbol should not be used by the Ajit Pawar faction in the upcoming elections, because it creates a lot of confusion. Back to you.
Well, it's interesting, Shrishti, that Sharad Pawar, in fact, right ahead of Lok Sabha, had been allotted the trumpet symbol. That was a symbol that was allotted for the Sharad Pawar faction of the NCP to be using in the Lok Sabha elections as well as the assembly elections. The clock is the original symbol which the Supreme Court allotted to Ajit Pawar camp, but have said that it's until unless there's a final verdict, it cannot be used. So is Sharad Pawar still in violation if he does use it before the final verdict, Shrishti?
Back then, as we know, the Supreme Court had issued an interim order with regard to the NCP faction dispute, where both the parties were allowed to use the specific symbols. Now, however, the court had directed that some undertaking had to be attached. For example, the Ajit Pawar faction was asked to issue a public notice saying that NCP's clock symbol, which they are using, is sub judice, and its use is also subject to adjudication, considering the main challenge, the main matter is still sub judice before the court. Now when Sharad Pawar faction has come before the top court, they have claimed that despite the undertakings, despite Supreme Court's clear orders, the orders have not been complied with, and still a lot of confusion is being caused on ground back there, where people still may associate the clock symbol with Sharad Pawar faction and vote accordingly. So all these arguments have been made in that particular application before the court. Now the court also said that the order that it had passed before before the Lok Sabha elections with regard to the use of symbols was in a way a very consent order. Both the parties had consented to that particular order and both of the parties were on board with it. Then why is this issue now being brought up? However, Sharad Pawar's lawyer has clearly said that the reason they are filing this application is also because Supreme Court's earlier orders have not been complied with. So now they will have to identify the places where such violations have taken, where the undertakings which were required to be given have not been given. We'll have to inform the court and then it will be on the court to see whether or not Ajit Pawar faction, according to the court, has also committed any violation of top court's order and if there will be any direction further with regard to which symbol exactly would be used by which party. Back to you.
Great. Thanks very much, Shrishti, for joining us with those details. We know that at this point, Sharad Pawar has asked an appeal to the Supreme Court asking for a ban or a restriction from the Ajit Pawar faction of the NCP using their original clock symbol. Well, we're going to see how this whole stage heats up in Maharashtra. The two factions already fighting it out for the symbol right weeks ahead of Maharashtra Assembly elections.